Millions of Americans. Take a look at this video. This is out of Wisconsin. Floodwaters rising along the Mississippi River. The record snow that pummeled the U.S. this year is now melting. And so we are seeing flooding from the Midwest to California. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa is in Davenport, Iowa. Maggie, just how high has the water reached there?
I want to weigh in on what they're talking about right here in regards towards the Mississippi River. You know, it hadn't been but less than 5 months ago to where the tugboat people working on the river, taking barges up and down the river, was restricted because the water had become so low that they couldn't run full barges up and down the river. Well, now it's just the opposite, but they've still had to put restrictions on the tugboat drivers because in some places the water is so erratical that it could cause problems in that way. What we're seeing is irregularities in our weather patterns that's going from one extreme to another. These are all the characteristics of that in which what science has been telling people about for now quite some time pertaining to global warming, that the vast majority of people here in America had bought into the lie towards being climate deniers, towards saying that it didn't occur. But what they're not saying here on this particular program, or they haven't yet, is yes, there was massive snowfalls up towards Minnesota and up in the northern areas, but at the same time, because it warms up so quickly, instead of warming up gradually, it warms up so quickly, it causes massive melting. And the melting is what's causing right now the massive flooding. So once more, because of the irregularities going on with our planet and our atmosphere, these are the repercussions of that. And it can go just as quickly, it can flop just as quickly to the far left as it can the far right. And we're not just seeing that here in America, but we're seeing that all over the planet. Yes, global warming, environmental changes is real.
Yeah, so Anna, to put it in perspective, flood stage here in Davenport is 15 feet. The water behind me is now at roughly 19.25. This is what they call major flood stage. And you can see the water behind me. Obviously, there's the Shell gas station there, which gives you some perspective about how far inland the Mississippi has come. Frankly, it's supposed to be hundreds of yards that way. And perhaps the scariest thing is, and people here are well aware of this, this is far from over. This is going to be, as our researchers have been calling it, a slow-moving disaster, with water in parts of Illinois and Iowa not expected to crest until possibly Monday, according to our climate team. This, as we're seeing, as you touched on, tornadoes in parts of the South, hail, snow in the Rockies, really just a crazy mashup of wild weather across the country this week. Take a look.
This morning, millions up and down the mighty Mississippi watching helplessly as the river's swollen banks continue to inch inland. Forecasters warning some in the region will see their worst floods in 20 years, with river levels in Illinois and Iowa slated to keep rising until potentially early next week. Multiple governors issuing disaster declarations.
Understand that this still can be a dangerous situation.
In La Crosse, Wisconsin, a drone capturing neighborhoods already underwater, while McGregor, Iowa is poised to see its highest river levels since 1965.
And this water came up really fast this time.
In Pleasant Valley near Davenport, people...
And the reason why it come up fast is because of the massive melting. We're dealing with characteristics today pertaining to the planet and Mother Nature such as we have never, ever experienced before towards going to the extremes. This is the reason why the Bible, part of the reason why the Bible, tells us to flee into the mountains whenever you shall see these things starting to occur. In other words, get out of the low-lying areas to where you're going to be more prone of crucial weather changes, just like what happened going on 2 years now up in Waverly, Tennessee, whenever it rained about 17.5 inches of rain, just like what happened just within the past 2 or 3 weeks over in Miami, down in Florida, where it rained 25 plus inches in less than 24 hours, and just like what we've seen recently happen up in Hazel, Kentucky, where the governor had to declare, I think, 4 or 5 counties disaster areas up in there because of the massive rainfall, that the deluges that fell. We can't emphasize enough on the state of affairs of where we are right now presently in the signs of end time final days. We can't emphasize on that enough. And to think that you still got atheists and you still got agnostics, you still got doubters, you still got climate deniers, you still got election deniers, you still got basically a group of people that don't know if they're coming and going, and they can't recognize the reality of the truth. This speaks volumes about how far out in left field that humanity has become just within the past 30 plus years, especially over here in America.
To get around by boat. The Mississippi River floods largely fueled, scientists say, by 6 to 18 inches of melting snowpack in North Dakota and Minnesota. A similar story out west, where park officials say by Friday they'll close much of the famed Yosemite Valley through at least May 3rd, as melting snow in California's mountains threatens flooding there too. This as hail hammers parts of the South, including Central Florida and Sweetwater, Texas, where a supercell dumping baseball-sized hail destroyed this storm chaser's windshield. And with just days until the start of May, snow slamming the Rocky Mountains, while a tornado was spotted touching down near Denver. A severe spring stretch threatening millions.
Near Denver, Colorado. Do you realize how abnormal that is? I mean, there was tornado activity this year in Southern California, around the LA basin. Once more, we're seeing tremendous irregularities out of Mother Nature, that the Bible says that these will be the signs of the end times, of either not enough rain or too much rain, deluges, droughts, fires, floods. and you still have people that want to deny that we're in the last days. We're not just in the last days. We're in the final last days. They've been preaching now for probably, I guess, ever since Christ come 2,000 years ago, in various entities, in various cultures, and various generations, that the end time was upon us. That's the reason why they basically classify the message towards it being an end time message. My message is not an end time message. My message is a final end time message, bringing out all the characteristics of the Bible, from the good all the way to the bad, from the bad all the way to the good. And if people can't comprehend that, if people can't act upon that, if people can't take notice of all this, then obviously they're either blind in one eye and can't see out of the other, or they're atheist and they're actually wanting the end to hurry up and come. That way they won't have to give an account towards how the things has gotten this far out of hand to begin with. Boy, isn't that a heavy price to pay, just to show your stubbornness or your ignorantness? Because the Bible says that pride cometh before a fall. And you take a lot of these prideful countries, a lot of these prideful nations, now they're starting to fall. And if they're not starting to fall in one perspective, they're starting to fall in another perspective. And if you ain't getting ready for the inedible to occur, then it's no one's fault but your own. It's no one's fault but your own. Just as Biden continues to keep telling people about the apocalypse, Biden keeps telling people that we need to finish the job. We still ain't seen a true Holy Ghost revival movement here within the land. Like I said, I'm not preaching the last days. I'm preaching the final last days. They've been preaching the last days now for the past 200 or 300 years here in America. And in some instances, it has really created a movement, a very, very powerful spiritual movement that has motivated the people in one direction or the other. But now, we're no longer preaching that same message, but now we're preaching the final last days. Not just the last days, but the final last days. There's a big difference in the message.
Millions for days on end.
We just keep seeing new breathtaking clips of video coming in like hour by the hour. In fact, I think the video clips, Anna, that you started with at the top of your segment, we hadn't even seen those yet. So it just keeps hitting new sections of the country. Back here along the Mississippi, again, we're in Davenport, Iowa. Officials are pleading with people because, again, this is likely to last for several more days, to basically have a kit ready to go, have all the clothes, medications, and necessities you might need to leave your home potentially for several days. Anna.
Better be ready for the worst and hope for the best. Thank you so much, Maggie Vespa, for your reporting.
And of course, most of your insurance companies are aware of this. And because of the area where you live, they're either denying being able to insure people, or they're charging such astronomical rates that you tend to wonder which would be worse, to pay the astronomical rate or take a chance on what damage is being caused to your home if it does flood, towards having to go in and refurbish your home. Right now, because of the hurricane that hit down in Florida last year, down below Orlando, down around Naples, because of the insurance scamming that's been going on now for quite some time down there, and whenever I say quite sometimes, I'm talking like 4 or 5 years. People was getting insurance claims on roof damage, and then the roofers wouldn't even show up, but the check had already been distributed to the company that was supposed to have done the repairs. Because the way that the insurance companies has clamped down on flood insurance policies, it has caused multiple, quadruple bankruptcy court settlements to have to come into play down in that region just within the past 6 months. And to be quite honest with you, the way that I understand it, down in that area that has spread out now beyond that area, that it has become very, very dangerous, because people's attitudes has changed, people's desperation, that they become more desperate in the events that they're having to face off on. And of course, if you'll compare that with what recently happened down in Miami with the flooding, where basically all their gas stations that has all their holding tanks below the ground, that all these holding tanks basically become contaminated with water because of the flooding. And that's a chaotic situation right now that isn't being looked upon in the right frame towards how desperate and how crucial that is right now going on in the Miami district. Every time, I keep continuously saying this, every time an event happens, it doesn't matter if it's the Mississippi drying completely up almost to the point that we have major droughts, and they had to reformigate towards how that they was going to distribute goods up and down the Mississippi, or we have massive flooding right now that's causing troubles. Every time these events occur, it diminishes the resources the resources is based upon supply and demand. And when you have more of a demand for the same resources than you do a supply, guess what happens to the price of the resources? They go up. I had an individual stop and talk to me yesterday out here at front of the yard pertaining to all this stuff. And he has a tendency of believing that it's going to go back to the Wild Wild West days, to where basically the fastest fastest drawing gunman is going to be the one that's going to be left standing, while somebody has to shovel that individual off into the dirt. And to think that people are thinking that, it is mind-blowing to me, in thinking that the only way we're going to be able to survive is by killing one another. You talk about taking one step forward and two steps back, my friends. That's exactly where we are right now, because of this resistance, belligerent movement that began during the Reagan and the Bush era, that even to this day, I still have not gotten any type of confirmation on either administration, much less the Tennessee government here pertaining to the Tennessee governor that banned me from all federal facilities, much less what went on over in Western Kentucky pertaining to LBL, and over towards Paducah, Kentucky, and Benton and Grand Rivers, and then being stonewalled by a group of people over in a place called Trigg County, Kentucky, Cadiz, Kentucky, because of certain people that was working in LBL. I have yet to get any type of confirmation from what went on in my life out in Oklahoma whenever I was out there doing journalist investigation work out there. I have yet to get any type of confirmation towards what went on in my life since I moved back to Tennessee in 2014 right here in Weakley County. So it's just an ongoing, I'm going to use the terminology of a Mexican standoff. We're in the middle of a Mexican standoff of a group of people that knows that they was the very ones that helped to create this. They was the very ones that misled the American people. Just like Fox, that just recently, within 2 days ago, less than 48 hours ago, got rid of one of their primary anchormans. That, the way I understand it, was making all kinds of money. Oodles and gobs of money. But because the owner of Fox, and I forgot his name, realized what was going on and how that it was going on, to be able to mark the slate clean, he had to get rid of the perpetrators that caused the problem to begin with. And I don't know that Fox will ever come back as strong as what Fox used to be. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll come back stronger. But what they done, they went to the head of the snake versus the tail of the snake, and they cut off the head. In other words, Fox acted appropriately. And we've seen other agencies here in the United States that's basically leaning towards doing the same. But we're still seeing so many agencies that's not doing the proper and right thing. We're not seeing certain individuals that's supposed to be outstanding leaderships in various communities that aren't coming clean in the past 30 plus years towards what has occurred here, especially right here in Northwest Tennessee. And I've just never in my life seen anything so sickening, appalling than what we're witnessing right now here in America, that is going from one extreme to another. From outlandish gun violence to what the Tennessee legislation body done about 3 or 4 weeks ago in banning or dismembering a couple of their members, even though all 3 of them should have been punished. They pointed their wrath out on the black race versus the white race. like I was talking to the individual yesterday, the state of Tennessee should have either punished all three of them equally, or they shouldn't have punished none of them at all. Which once more proves that that seed of condemnation and that seed of bitterness that basically between the Night Riders and the KKK helped form here is still alive and well even to this day, even in areas that it's not supposed to be alive and well in. I've got to looking very, very hard at studying some of the things that I've been looking at. And the people here in the state of Tennessee was a completely different group of people until the Civil War broke out. In between the Night Riders in this area, they went from bad to worse, especially whenever Nathan Bedford Forrest started promoting the ideal of basically white supremacists. That even to this day, you can still meet people in various places that has just as much hatred against the blacks as the blacks do against the whites. But what I was going to say is that the group of people before the Night Riders in this particular area, going back into the Revolutionary War, was a completely different set of people. And then it started going backwards in the early 1900s after the great earthquake. And that earthquake basically caused a great deal of superstition in this area that's supposed to be the Bible Belt area. And of course, the Civil War was basically the dagger in the heart that finished them off in the way that they felt being segregated a society. We know that by the assassination of Martin Luther King. We know that by other things that has went on here in the South. But you would think by now, especially since the 60s, since the 70s, of these various movements, you would think that would have already been put to rest. But no, it hadn't been put to rest. Whenever you see it right in front of your very eyes and you call it the way that it's supposed to be called, that happened up in Nashville, Tennessee, just like my family, in 1976, once we realized that our father had made a decision the way that he did towards not allowing for his son's organs to be placed back into anybody's body and saving their lives, because the doctors down at Memphis could not guarantee him that his son's organs was going to be placed back into a white person, we realized how sick that our father truly was, our biological father. Well, now I'm realizing that sickness wasn't just in my biological father, but that sickness was spread far and wide, that even to this day, you still have cemeteries that bury the whites on one side, the black on the other side. The majority of the churches down here in the Bible Belt area, and you won't find this so much out west, but out here, they still practice it. All white churches or all black churches. Yeah, they've moved away from the segregation towards the water fountains. Well, this, if he's white, he drinks out of this water fountain. This one, if he's black, drinks out of this water fountain. Or they've moved away towards segregating, towards putting all the blacks on the back of the bus and all the whites on the front of the bus. They have conformed a little bit, but they haven't conformed completely. That's the reason why I and people like prior President Obama says that the country has not fully conformed in the way that the country should have conformed in. And until we're willing to see that revival, until we're willing to open up our hearts and understanding these indignations and these basically these evildoers, these wrongdoers, we're going to continue to go backwards more and more and more. Severe weather sweeps across the country. That's what we have seen intensify, my friends, just within the past few years. That's only drastically intensifying, just as the Bible talks about. He said that as the end is approaching, he said that it would be as a woman travailing with bringing forth a child in childbirth. That as the woman is getting closer and closer to delivering the baby, the pains increase and they get closer together. That's exactly what we're seeing right now of the characteristics of Mother Nature that is responding and reacting the way that it's responding and reacting because of the sinfulness and the wickedness that not only we're doing to one another, but because of what we're doing to the planet. In other words, Mother Nature is throwing a tantrum. And Mother Nature is trying to wake us up. But people don't want to be awoken. Just like people don't want to support the founder of the Windmill Ministries because they feel like that if they can abolish, get rid of, destroy, eliminate the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, that the message, because he's the messenger, is going to suddenly go away. I'm telling you, that is their concept. And that is one reason why, even to this day, I still don't have people knocking on my door in support of the Windmill Ministries missions. Now, they'll lie to you and they'll tell you, just like right now, what's going on in the White House with South Korea, in which I'm pretty sure that their intentions mean well. I'm pretty sure that Biden up there, he truly wants to support our allies pertaining to Japan and South Korea, and he's truly trying to make a statement to those that are opposing us that we're going to stick with you because we believe in peace and we believe in democracy, and we are not going to forfeit to our obligations to our allies. I'm sure they mean well on the outside. But fundamentally, we're not seeing that movement. Now, I don't know if it's because I didn't get proper education. I don't know if it's because now my age. I don't know if it's because they have burnt their own bridges and now they're walking around with egg on their face. But the bottom line is this is the same characteristics and the same patterns that I've seen now going on 30 some odd years since 1989, whenever the ministry was first attacked. So they haven't changed their game plan. And the white man's still speaking with the forked tongue towards speaking in one direction, but meaning something totally different, because proof is in the pudding towards what we're actually seeing. Especially coming from Northwest Tennessee. You know, I had a guy helping me on a car yesterday over in Kenton, Tennessee. I ain't going to mention his name. But he asked me, he said, Juby, I've heard stories that your father was abusive. He goes, was that true? And this is a guy now that worked beside my brother, I think for either 4 or 5 years, maybe longer than that, in a factory. He's a little older than me. I think he's about 64. And he does sideline work. He works on a lot of mechanic work, works on lawnmowers and etc. And I had to look at him and I said, yeah, he was abusive. But I explained to him why he was abusive. Because of the characteristics that he had inherited from the scars of war. Okay, that covers my dad in the sins that my dad committed during the time that he committed those sins. But what kind of excuse does the rest of the community around here have? That's my question. Because the majority of them didn't go to war. And the majority of them knowed that the type of damage that he was doing to his family was basically irreversible damage. Now, these same people was the very people that I talked to whenever I first come back here in 2014 that said we was frightened of your father, or we was afraid that we was going to get our teeth knocked down our throats like y'all was getting abused. Or they would come up with these excuses, well, we've always been told to mind your own business, and it was considered meddling if you got onto somebody about the way that they was correcting their family. Just like the old concept of the blacks being on one side and the whites being on the other. I don't know what it's going to take to break that evil, that grip of hatred that has befallen upon this nation. But I guarantee you, whatever it's going to take, it's coming near a neighborhood near you. And if it ain't coming in one form, it's going to come in another. And until we're willing to see a real revival in this great nation that I cry for, my heart breaks every day for, we're only going to drastically see things grow intensifyingly worse.
Reporting, and that's going to do it for us today. Reporting from New York, I'm Ana Cabrera. Thank you for being with us. Jose Diaz-Balart picks up our coverage right now.
It is so intensifyingly sickening in what we're seeing on a day-to-day level. And it's as if we live in like three different realities. We live in a reality of the weak and the depleted, the poor, those that has been ravaged with poverty. Then we see another reality here in America where you have the mid-class is trying to work, and that can't get ahead because of the surrounding circumstances in their life. And then we see another reality pertaining to the wealthy and the fortunate and those that's already achieved what they needed to achieve. That way they can sit on easy street and live out their golden years. But we're also seeing another reality in this country that a lot of people don't talk about, pertaining to the reality of spiritual warfare. And we're still in the reality of a group of people that only wants to believe part of the Bible instead of all the Bible. We're still in the reality to where the wicked has turned things around to where the things that we used to look at towards them being good, now they're bad, and the things that we looked upon at one time towards them being bad, now they're considered good. It's flip-flopped. That's the reality that we're in right now. And until we're willing to break that reality and go back to the original concept of knowing the differences between right and wrong, good and evil, we're going to continue to go backwards more and more each and every day. And it is so sad. It is so sad. I don't know why this thing ain't doing right. Got locked somewhere or another. I ain't never had to do that. TV got locked.
On your screen.
TV got locked.
33 past the hour. Turning now to some headlines beyond our borders. In Sudan, the State Department confirmed the death of a second American since the violence there broke out 12 days ago. An estimated 16,000 Americans live in Sudan, the majority of whom are dual citizens. According to the World Health Organization, more than 450 people have been killed, 4,000 injured in the violence. This morning, an historic first. The Vatican announced Pope Francis will allow women to vote in an upcoming meeting of bishops for the first time. He is allowing 70 non-bishops to join a Vatican body that votes on church.
Now, see what I'm saying about things being behind? The women's liberal movement here in America actually began in the 20s out in California. Of course, it didn't take on mainstream until long about World War II or shortly after World War II, to where women had the right to be able to vote just like men as far as being equal. They're just now coming around to that. We still have places in the Middle East that still feel like that the women should be treated like dogs, animals, that don't have a right to teach, don't have a right to be involved in government affairs. Matter of fact, they don't even have a right to show their face, much less any other parts of their body, because of their primitive thinking ideals. You still have places over in Saudi Arabia that are just now starting to open up towards acknowledging that women should be able to drive an automobile, much less walk around without a veil over their face. It is so entirely mixed up. Over in America, you got women that barely cover over their nipples and their, between their legs, that get out here because they know that they got a good looking body and deliberately flaunt themselves so that men and women will lust after them. Basically, walking around nude. And then on the other perspective, you got people over in other parts of the world that think that women should be totally covered up, including a veil over their face, and the only thing that they should possibly show is their hands and their feet. So basically what you have is a mixed up group of people from A to Z. It doesn't matter if it's in one country or the other. And like I told you a while ago, pertaining to the war in Sudan, the North Africa, every time something like that occurs, it's bringing that much more remorse and damage to the innocent, and it's depleting the resources around in that area. And eventually, you continue to keep seeing this again and again and again, regardless whether it's coming in the forces of man or the forces of the supernatural. You're going to have a whole group of people that's going to be suffering on account of it, coming near a neighborhood near you, that Christ said to flee into the mountains whenever you shall see these things occurring. That now most insurances in America won't even cover somebody if they're in a flood zone or even in a potential flood zone or a hurricane ravaged area that has the potential towards a flood zone. I have never seen so much chaoticness at the age of 62 in my entire life. But we're witnessing it. We're right here in the middle of a storm, and it's only intensifying more and more and more. Unbelievable. Absolutely astronomical, unbelievable.
Once the pandemic era policy, known as Title 42, is lifted on May 11th, just over 2 weeks from now. This comes as shelters in El Paso are telling NBC station KTSM they are seeing an increase in the number of migrants showing up before Title 42 is lifted. With us now to talk more about this is Blake Barrow, Chief Executive Director of the Rescue Mission of El Paso, one of the shelters that has seen an increase in people there. It's great seeing you, Blake. Thank you for being with us. What is the current situation at your shelter today?
Lots of people. And in fact, we're so flooded with migrants, we had to make the decision a couple of weeks ago to convert to a family-only shelter. So there's only so many square feet of space. If we're going to have to choose between caring for single men or leaving children on the street, it's not a tough decision.
Give us an idea of how many people we're talking about and what's the capacity and what's it looking like now?
Right now we're housing about 150, and that number went as high as about 200 at the end of December. Then it went back down a little bit, and toward the middle of March, we're right back up to more than we've housed the whole time. And this began on September 9th, when the Immigration Department just pulls up a bus outside of the rescue mission and offloads about 150 people.
And so no previous warning, no planning, no coordination. I'm wondering what kind of planning, coordination are you receiving now? We're less than, just a couple of weeks from Title 42 losing Title 42. What coordination planning are you involved with right now?
Well, the El Paso County is great. They've been very, very helpful. But you know, there's only so much that any of us can do. The rescue mission has been a homeless shelter here in El Paso since 1952, and we're accustomed to housing about 120, 130 people. So that number has more than doubled. We rented space across the street from the water department. It used to be a mechanic's garage, and it has a great big space. We can put out Red Cross cots, and that's enough space for, we could fit another 200 in there. And then there's another building that we're about to open up on the same land, and that could house another 60 or so. But here we are at 250, and the county just informed us this week that there's some 35,000 people waiting to cross from Mexico.
35,000. 35,000. And that's just in that one area that they're talking about. And this is just basically one entity of people that's housing these people, that if you was to go all the way up and down Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and out towards California, there ain't no telling how many other stories would be just as horrifying as this one right here is. So does America have a problem? Just as the Bible teaches, for I will not put upon to thee none other burden. Hold fast till I come. I have not found thy works perfect yet, to repent and go back and do thy first works over again, or else I, this is God speaking in Revelations, I will come back and cast thee off into great tribulation. That's where we're heading, friends. Now, you can believe the politicians, the uppity-ups, the bigwigs, because their reality isn't the same reality as ours. Even though you may have people screaming and hollering and crying to them, they still don't feel the full effects towards what's actually happening down here in the field. Because they don't live in the field. They don't have to work in the field. They don't have to do without air conditioning in the summer. They don't have to do without heat in the winter. They don't get flooded. They don't get burnt out. They don't get bombarded with a bunch of hurricanes or tornadoes up there in Washington, D.C. ordinarily, not up in the White House and the Capitol. They're in a different reality up there. And, of course, your news enhances that, because that's what they're shoveling out to the American people. And the American people are so confused right now, they don't know who to believe. A matter of fact, the individual that I spoke to yesterday said, I don't believe none of them. Well, that is a very, very sad but dangerous state of your citizens in any country. Once you have reached the level of uncertainty, once you have reached the level of doubt, once you have reached the level of trust to that degree, you're now living in a very, very dangerous state of affairs. And that's not just happening here in America. That's happening all over the world. And if we're not smart enough to see this, and if we're not smart enough to contradict this, towards going up against this, then obviously we're going to be consumed. Just like a cancer that's spreading across the land. In other words, it's an infliction. And the infliction is growing even worse every day. And if it's not growing worse because of man-made events, it's growing worse because of forces of nature events. I pray that the people would take heed, and that they will turn from their sinful and wicked ways before it is too late. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors towards where we go from here. And heaven help us all in these obviously trying times that we're living in. And shalom.